And the goal is to make it sustainable. Like, it's not just a one-time thing that, like, great, we'll do it this year and we'll never do it again. Like, we want to make travel hacking sustainable and, like, a good and a healthy way of even, like, opening credit cards and, like, knowing our budgets and knowing how much we spent. And I think, like, that's the goal. So, like, the goal is not to just, like, take one trip and then we're in debt for the rest of our lives.
No.
Like, the goal is to kind of, like, we can actually take these trips and maybe they'll be spread out a bit more, but, like, they'll be actually worth it because they'll be, like, free or cheaper.
I'm Erica.
And I'm CJ.
And you're listening to the Her Podcast.
In today's episode, we sit down with Marley and Dan Fast. This couple and dynamic duo is on a mission to unlock the world of travel hacking for Canadians. This conversation was so much fun, and if you've ever wondered what it actually looks like to travel the world on points, or even just dip your toe into the world of travel, earning points and using them towards upgrades, free accommodation, and flights, you need to listen and save this episode. We get into what even is travel hacking. Don't worry, you guys. We unpack this for you. The common misconceptions around it and the most asked questions, like, will this affect my credit score? Is it a good idea to have multiple credit cards? We really get into travel hacking for anyone, but specifically Canadians, because there isn't a lot of content out there for us Canadians. Even if you're not planning to globetrot around the world, we discuss how you can use points in your everyday life towards other things. If you guys are at all interested in this, we talk about where to even start. So, you guys are going to want to listen to this episode. Marley and Dan, last but not least, also give us their top travel tips. Turn it up as we dive into the world of travel hacking with Marley and Dan Fast. Okay, so you guys have obviously been well-traveled, but obviously I want to touch on your guys' upbringing. Let's start there.
Sure, I can go first.
Yeah.
I was born in the Philippines.
Yes.
And I grew up there for 18 years. Did basically whole life there. I'd come back to Canada every couple of years just so that my parents can still, like, be in the Philippines. And so I kind of knew a bit of Canadianness, but then when I was around 14, we came back and we stayed at my mom's cousin's farm, like just 40 minutes outside of Rosetown. And that's when I kind of fell in love with, like, farming. And so that led me then to work for them for like 7 summers. And then I moved to Canada to take agriculture. And so that's kind of like started me in my, like, transition to, okay, well, I'm, like, Canadian now and I have to learn how to do that. But I'm still really passionate about travel. So, like, where does that fit into all of this?
Yeah.
Well, and what are some of the differences then? Because, like, obviously you moving, like, you've grown up in the Philippines, so you would have that sort of culture.
Yeah.
And then coming to Canada, you would get what would be to us reverse culture shock, right? Of, like, coming to Canada, you would get culture shock.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. What did that look like integrating back into Canada?
Well, it was very interesting because, like, I look the same as everyone else. Like, no one really think that I am Canadian, but that I, like, didn't grow up here. And so, like, that was probably, like, the hardest thing is kind of everyone just, like, thought, like, oh, like, you know what, like, these pop culture references are. And I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And I even, like, had a bit of an accent, like a Tagalog accent. And everyone's like, oh, so you're German. I'm like, no, I'm like, you probably would never guess it because I just don't look Filipino, but it's actually a Tagalog accent. But so that was, very, like, interesting, just, like, in trying to learn how, okay, like, how to just even be myself and all that, and finding who I am, and had a few ups and downs, but now it's, like, great. I'm like, I can mix and blend between the two cultures. And
Marley, tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in Saskatoon, but yeah, when I was 10, my parents, we moved to Zimbabwe. My dad worked at a mission hospital out there as a pharmacist, and so we lived out there for a year and then came back to Canada, but then did lots of traveling. Like, my mom did lots of traveling for her work, and so I think I've traveled to lots of places that people would consider quite, like, dangerous, but I've been to, like, Iraq or Colombia, and I feel like I'll say to my parents, like, well, you kind of set me up for this. Like, you took me when I was 10 to Zimbabwe, which wasn't, like, super stable at that point. And so I'm like, well, I think I don't know, it just feels like it's, like, part of my whole upbringing, and, like, life is like, well, there's a big world, like, I want to explore it and see it. And I always sort of just thought, like, of course I'm going to see the world. Like I'm going to travel. I'm going to see places. So that was a big connecting point for us when we met. Was like,
where did you guys meet?
We met in Saskatoon.
Okay.
We met online. We were both leaders.
Online.
It's funny. It was during COVID. And so we kind of both met online at our college and career leadership group.
Yep.
And we were both leaders. It was our first time. And the people above us decided to put these two new leaders together and lead a group. And so that's kind of was like our initial connecting point.
So we only ever connected online for like months, just over these, over these Zoom calls.
Drag it back.
And then eventually we met in person. So.
And it's like love at first sight. Were you like very into this relationship, both of you, or what was it?
Kind of was, but then we broke up a few times before we got it together.
Yeah, exactly.
Been there.
So,
but it was like, I'm like, oh, like she's such an interesting woman, and like she's traveled a lot, and I haven't really like found that a lot with people from Saskatchewan, and so I'm like, oh, like this is very interesting. Like this person has been everywhere, and she just like looks normal, kind of just like me, and so I'm like, I don't know, it's kind of just like you would never think, but then like you dive a bit deeper, and then you're like, oh, there's this whole world that opened up, and that really attracted me to you.
Aw, that's so nice.
Sweet. So you guys obviously then had travel kind of in your blood, you know, from a young age. So when you guys got married, has your plan always been to like dive into the, like, you know, how did you transition your passion individually into wanting to travel together and as a couple?
Yeah, I mean, so we got married last June only, so we've been married for like 7 months. But I think we always knew like, okay, we want to travel, and we kind of had this idea that like, oh, we should like take sort of a big trip, but well, it'll probably take us a while to like save up for that, or, you know, just like figure out what we want to do. Like there's just lots of pieces, right? But then, like, right around the time that we were getting married, his sister, who lives in the Philippines, she got engaged. And so we're like, okay, well, like, depending on when that wedding's going to be, you know, of course we're going to go. And essentially just, like, the pieces fell into place for us to, like, take this kind of extended trip during that time. And so...
Because you're already over there. Right?
Yeah,
like you've already taken the time and the money and the energy to fly across the world. Like you may as well be there for a while.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And so I think like we didn't really expect to be like married for like 5 months or whatever it was.
Yeah, the plan was kind of, I think, to do it like this year, like kind of like this upcoming, well, next winter, I guess.
Yeah.
But then my sister's wedding kind of like sparked the like, okay, well, maybe actually now is the time to do this.
And so we went for it.
This is what I want to hear though, because I mean, what we haven't said yet is you guys are like travel hackers.
Yes.
Right? Like you guys have like found a system to travel in a really affordable way is my understanding. And so I think it's interesting to hear that backstory, which is, you know, you're young, you're married, freshly married, and you're going to go on this big trip. I mean, unless you've been really saving, like, how did you do that? Because I think that's what people want to hear is like, I want to go on a last minute trip. Or, I mean, prime example, my sister-in-law got married in Egypt during COVID. And because of COVID, all of that stuff, we couldn't go. But we're sitting there going, well, now we got to get to Egypt.
Right.
Yeah,
And how? Like, how do we do this when we have this has kind of come out of left field because we thought the wedding was going to be in Canada. Like, how do we now all of a sudden prep for this? And so I think that's where you guys come in and go, here's what we did. And I want to hear that.
Well, I think it started from me because I am in like the YouTube generation. And so I like watch YouTube growing up and all this stuff. And so, of course, being into travel, I follow these bunch of travel pages and stuff like that. And there's this one travel couple that I follow, Carrie and Nate. And they kind of sparked me to look into travel hacking a bit more. And I've been following them for like 3-4 years. But then kind of last January, I was kind of like, oh, okay, like, I know that we're going to get married. Like, we were engaged by then.
He was very confident.
I just knew, you know, like...
We've been breaking up, but we were going to get married.
Exactly, but we're going to get married now. No, like, we were engaged. And so I'm like, okay, like, kind of like, what does that mean? And kind of like even looking at the financial side of it and all that. And so, and then I like came across they actually have a website that talks about travel hacking. And I'm like, this is such an interesting thing. And one of the things that stood out to me is that the best way to maximize travel hacking is actually like if you're planning something big. And so like we were planning a wedding.
Like a big purchase.
A big purchase, yeah. And so like there was going to be these big costs that comes with our wedding. And so you basically get then the benefits of like getting points with that purchase.
Right. So it's like you're already paying for the wedding. So you may as well maybe get some, what I'm understanding is some really great credit cards where you're going to get great points.
A lot of points.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And so I basically came to her and I'm like, hey, I have this plan, travel hacking plan that maybe it sounds a bit crazy because I've never heard anybody, my friends, like anyone do it.
Yeah.
But I'm like, it sounds crazy, but should we try it out? And she was like, if you think it is, sure. And so I got my first credit card and then opened it up and spent the minimum amount to get the sign up bonus. And I'm like, this is awesome.
You're like, box check.
I feel like at the beginning too, you were a little bit like, credit card happy. He was like, can I get another one? And I was like, okay, let's just like get one and do one, you know, like.
Because I think, and we were talking about this, like I think people are really worried about their credit scores and like having too many credit cards can look bad. And like, how are you managing that? Like, was that ever a fear for you as he's coming and being like, let's get another credit card? They were like, whoa, this is going to mess everything up in the future.
I think one of the things, because that definitely, those are the questions, right? And those are the things that even like now, as we've done our whole trip and we've talked about this more, like that, those are the questions people have, right? Is like, well, what about your credit score? Like, it's bad to have a bunch of credit cards. I think for us, like one of the big things that actually, maybe like a byproduct of the travel hacking was actually realizing like, if we want to do this, like we have to have a super good grip on our financial situation. Like we can't just be like, oh, I don't even know how much money's in our bank account. Should we get another credit card? Like it doesn't work like that. That's gonna end badly, right?
Yeah.
And we're
that's like irresponsible.
Yeah, it's completely irresponsible, and we're in no way wanting to promote that, right? Or live that. And so I think like we had already been using like a budgeting system. We use You Need a Budget or YNAB, and so we actually knew like, well, okay, how much money do we have every month and where does it go and what's happening? Like we still use it like systematic way of budgeting. And so we felt really confident in this is how much money we spend every month. So we actually know like, okay, what sign up bonuses can we hit or how much like kind of what's doable for us. And we did a ton of research around credit scores, like how often can you open a credit card? What's going to happen to your credit score? And actually our credit scores have only gone up because we've done it well. Yep. We haven't, I would be like, okay, well, let's just wait. And noticing that actually if you wait about 60 to 90 days between each credit card and you pay off your credit card in full every time, your credit score will actually just go up.
Because that was my question. I was like, what are we doing to make sure that the credit score, so it's waiting 60 to 90 days and making sure that it's paid off?
Well, and then I have two questions, and you can pass. Did we say this? If we ask anything, you're allowed to be like, no.
Yep.
How many credit cards did you guys sign up for to like be able to do this?
So last year, like between the two of us, we signed up for 10.
Oh my gosh, 10 was in my head. I was like, I bet it's 10. But okay, so you have 10. My other question is, are you then, because you're talking about these signing up bonuses. Yeah. And I like have no problem being honest on these podcasts. My husband does all this. Like he's like, this is your new credit card. And I'm like, sounds great.
Awesome.
Like, I trust you completely. Like, just let me know what the balance is or whatever. So my question is, are you getting these credit cards purely for the bonus and then not using them? Or are you like, no, we're actively using them because they give us great points?
Well, I think there's kind of like two different things to think about when you're opening a credit card. You're like, okay, what is the use of this credit card? Like, is this my everyday spender that I'm going to put things on, or am I getting this card because of the sign up bonus? And so usually we keep it's like good to keep 2 credit cards at least, like kind of like open and kind of like the one you're using every day because it'll get you like, let's say it'll get you 5 times the points on groceries. But then this one, like let's say this one's American Express, and so like, well, not everywhere it takes American Express, and so this other one then you'll use like in replacement of that. And so it's kind of just like, because you don't want to open credit cards too often, you still want to though like maximize, okay, I want every purchase to be on a credit card though.
Because Nick goes crazy when I use my debit card. He's like, no, the points.
Exactly.
I'm like,
You're throwing
I forgot it in the other wallet.
There's so many different ways to like use your points. There's a formula so that you know how efficiently you're using your points.
Ooh.
And so anything basically above 2 cents per point is like really good, and anything under 2 cents per point is like, that's okay. And like, I maybe if I use it like to book an airplane ticket, it would be like 3 cents per point. But if I use it to cancel out my credit card, it would only be 1 cent per
Right.
point. And so it's kind of like you want to maximize your value for like the amount of points you have. You want to have a small amount of points and get as big as a gift as you can.
The most value
The
for
most
your
value,
points.
yeah.
Well, because I've always wondered. So when I go in and I look at my credit card points, I'm like looking at it and I'm like, you know, you can kind of be like, okay, this thing is this many points. Like, let's say, pick an even number, 20,000 points,
Yeah.
you know? And then you're like, okay, but I think that this is valued around this much,
Yeah.
right? And then maybe a different thing is valued around this. And so is that where you're calculating and being like,
Yeah.
what purchase? Because they're not actually all equal.
They're not all equal.
No, like you're looking at it and being like, oh, 20,000 points, 30,000 points. They must, you know, but like the back end math is not the same.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so some of those things, like for example, if you're to book an economy flight, sure, that's great. You got a free flight probably with your points, but the value on booking like a business class or a first class flight, like you just got like $5,000 or $10,000 worth of value for not that many more points.
Okay, talk to me about that. What, is
Okay.
it when booking one or using your points towards it?
Okay. What I'm about to tell you may have you either shocked or rolling your eyes. I have received both reactions, so here we go. I'm terrified of public speaking, or at least I used to be. I know. How can me, Erica, be nervous of public speaking? Believe it or not, it's always been something I've struggled with. Even though I'm outgoing, extroverted, and not afraid of attention, public speaking has always been this big thing that I just could never handle or do. Until now. I went from feeling sick and wanting to back out of any speaking engagement I was leading to feeling confident, prepared, and equipped with the tools I needed to take on any crowd that was put in front of me. And I'm going to tell you how that happened. I had the opportunity to sit down with Heather Morrison on episode 58 of our podcast to chat all things public speaking. Heather is a broadcaster and public speaking coach who is changing the lives of so many individuals just like me. I learned so many different things in the 1 hour we got to visit, like feeling nervous is normal, having the shakes doesn't mean you can't provide value, and the most important thing, that public speaking is a skill anyone can learn. I think we assume that being a good public speaker is something people are born with, when really anyone who has a desire to be good at it can be. They just need the right tools. Coach Heather will show you how to get rid of everything that is getting in your way so you can become the confident and authentic speaker you're meant to be. Based on years of research and real-world application, Heather has created a program that unlocks the potential of even the most nervous speaker, like yours truly. I used one of her techniques this fall just moments before going on stage, and I couldn't believe the way it calmed me down. Her Deliver Your Best program is a one-of-a-kind coaching program where professionals become confident and authentic speakers in just 10 weeks. Now, if you're stressed about time and are unsure on committing for 10 weeks, but still want Heather's help, then make sure to check out the Deliver Your Best Essentials Handbook. It's the perfect place for people like you to get started. Heather was sweet enough to offer her listeners a discount code for 50% off the Deliver Your Best Handbook with code HER50 at checkout. If you're looking to kickstart your public speaking career or get over those fears that have been holding you back, then it's time to book in with Coach Heather. Find her on Instagram at Deliver Your Best, spelled exactly as it sounds, and click on her bio to apply for the Deliver Your Best program today. And if you're antsy and you want to get going right away, make sure to snag the Deliver Your Best handbook and use code HER50 to get 50% off. It's time to deliver your best, friends. Book in with Coach Heather.
If you are on the market to buy or sell a home, or maybe both, and want to make the process as stress-free and smooth as possible, then I have the realtor for you. Lacey Cazette is an award-winning Saskatoon realtor who prides herself in being your one-stop shop for both buying and selling. And her passion for her work just shines through when you meet her. Lacey has over 12 years experience in the real estate industry, a 98% list to sale ratio, and she prioritizes an extensive and personalized marketing strategy for each of her clients. Because we all know that the best strategy is more important than ever now. Along with her husband and partner, Kyle Barneski, Lacey is licensed in residential, commercial, and farm. So she literally has you covered no matter what real estate area you need. And because she's built such solid connections in the industry, she can dial up the best lawyers, mortgage brokers, appraisers, and contractors for you too. Lacey has also given us an exclusive discount code for her community. You can use the code LACY5 to save $500 off one real estate transaction. You guys, that's huge. So if you want a driven, hardworking, and connected agent who'll go above and beyond for you, this is a no-brainer, guys. Get in touch with Lacey. You'll find her at Realty Executive Saskatoon or on socials at Lacey Cossette. That's at LACEYCOSSETTE and online at lacycossette.com. And remember to mention the code LACY5 to save $500 on one real estate transaction. We're linking all her info in the show notes for you.
It's for when using your points towards it. And so let's say like an economy flight will cost $200.
Yeah.
And you'll pay 15,000 points for it.
Okay.
Booking a business class flight will maybe cost $700.
Yeah.
But you'll only use like 25,000 points to book it.
Right. So
and so it's kind of like the ratio is just
the
like
ratio, yeah.
Like the more expensive actually like a business class flight is, the more valuable it is to you to use your points towards it.
Interesting.
So the thing is like it honestly just depends on your goals though, right? Like you guys are saying, hey, like I use my points for gas because I'm not going somewhere, but it gets me free gas. Like that's not a loss, right?
No.
That's still a win.
No.
And so like, cause sometimes people will get really caught up in, well, how do I get the most value from my points? It's like, but well, what do you want?
Well, what adds value to your life?
Exactly. Yeah.
So if for even in the travel hacking world, it's like, well, people can get so caught up in like, I have to stay at the Ritz-Carlton. It's like, well, we never stayed at the Ritz-Carlton.
Yeah.
You could use your points to stay at the Ritz-Carlton, but that's probably all you're going to do this year, right? Whereas for us, we're like, we would rather fly mostly economy and stay at like nice hotels, but not like these 5-star super fancy things, and go farther and more often than stay at something super fancy. But that doesn't mean that the person who goes on one vacation and stays at something super fancy, like, is that right or wrong, right?
Yeah.
It's like, what is it that you're after and how many points can you get that, like, can basically push your budget farther so that you're saving money, right? So that's essentially what we've done, is figure out what works for us in how we use our points.
Well, and I think so many people listening, you know, we're talking about travel hacking, right? And so again, some people might be like, okay, well, I'm not going to travel the world. Like, so, you know, but I'm like, things come up. People pass away. You want to fly across Canada. You want to go to Mexico. You know what I mean? Like you want to go to the States, right? Like people are having trips. So I'm even thinking like, how do we, you know, someone who's like, I don't want to travel the world. I want to be a globetrotter. But like, how do we use travel hacking to even prep us to have points so that when we need to book a flight, like do points expire? And that probably like changes on the thing, you know? But I'm like, what would be a good path to even just like get some points to be able to fly within like even North America?
Yeah, I think that like credit cards like is the best path to accumulate points.
Yep.
And there's like two different kinds of points, and so like points is just it's so incredible because it lets you do so much more than if you actually just bought the airline or the hotel room out of pocket.
Okay.
Like with like we have Marriott points to stay at Marriott Bombay hotels, and you can basically cancel up to a day like before you want to stay there.
Right,
and
like
so,
the insurance and stuff probably changes too.
Yeah.
And even like it's the same amount of points often to book. Like we booked like the week before Christmas.
Yeah.
Like we booked it a week out in Prague. We're like, oh, should we change our plans and stay in Prague instead? Oh, let's just book it a week out.
Yeah.
Whereas if you were booking a week out of Christmas, paying for it, like you're gonna pay like $300 for some like hole in the wall.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
Right.
So there's like even the perk of like,
It's just so much more flexible.
yeah, the flexibility is a huge thing for us that we find with points.
Yeah, we've like changed our like trip so many times, like last minute, just because we're like, okay, there's a better deal over here, so why don't we just like scratch that, maybe wait for later and do this, and then come back and just like shuffle around your points.
So how are you watching this?
Like spreadsheets.
Like I'm like, this feels a bit like stock markety. Like you're like, I'm watching the numbers and over here's the deal and now over here. Like, how are you? Because this to me, I won't lie, sounds so overwhelming. Like I'm like, this is why my husband does all this, because I'm like, I'd be like, just take my money. Like I don't want it. Like, so I'm curious on how you're like switching your trip and knowing when there's a deal or not.
Yeah, I think there's a few factors that play into that. One is just even signing up for like emails from like other people who travel hack. the sad thing is in Canada, there's not a lot.
Yeah.
There's probably only like a number, like honestly, probably like 4 people that we know that like actually travel hack for Canadians.
So you guys are filling a great niche and a great need.
Right?
I believe in you. Keep going.
But like in the States, there's like hundreds of different people, even on Instagram and stuff like that. But like a way I follow the deals is like through signing up through like newsletters and stuff like that. And so like there's like the daily drop that like they send out a newsletter every day about like American and Canadian. And so you can like follow that and be like, oh, there's actually this deal right now. Or also we just like, because we enjoy it so much, we just honestly we'll just go on like our apps, like our Marriott apps, Air Canada app, be like, oh, like where can we fly cheap today? And we just like, we do that constantly. And so we kind of just like know how much points are supposed to cost for that thing. And then sometimes you're like, actually, that's such a great deal. Should we like go for it? And
so
like,
what does it take for me to like hire you guys to, I'll be like,
You're like, where's
can
this
you
the cheat sheet?
please? No, I was gonna be like, just do it for me. I want a cheat sheet. I want them to do it
We just
for
want
me.
Nick to listen to the episode.
I'm like, Nick, get in here. Go listen to this.
You can set up a meeting with Nick.
Yeah, but it should be travel consulting. There you go. That's the next thing.
No.
So you've obviously done a lot of traveling, a lot of like finding the best deals. I'm curious if you can share a little bit on maybe some of the other traveling hacks that I feel like you've probably picked up, which is like you've been in a lot of airports probably. I know people are listening and they're like, okay, so I got to sign up for credit cards. I got to like follow these people so I know what's going on. But the next step is like, I'm curious, how do you make your traveling enjoyable when you're jumping from place to place? Like, what are you bringing? What's like your must-haves in an airport?
Must-haves in a
Or
airport
like, what are you
would
like,
be-
don't bring this, bring this.
All the things. Like I'm thinking like, what are you guys like most commonly packing? You know, like how are you navigating through airports smoothly? Like what's on an airplane? Like what do you want to have? You know, like are you guys bringing luggage or just carry on?
Yeah, we've just gone with carry on. For this trip, we used like Osprey backpacks, which like has its perks but also its downfalls. Like,
Are those
45
big ones?
meters?
it's like heavy. So
Like you
at
look
the
like you're going
getting
up a
a
mountain.
workout.
I mean, yeah.
But like they fit to like bring on a plane, right? And so
Yeah,
they're not
that's
they're
the
not the
beauty.
super big. There's just
They're not, like,
60
big
liter
tall,
ones,
right?
And then there's the 45s that we have, the 45 ones.
I have them as well because we traveled, but
Yeah.
I don't remember what size we have either.
Yeah.
I'm just so bougie. I just like my backpack has to be like cute and like leather and like monogrammed or something. I'm like, it's probably
We're
only
like
gonna hold.
hippies traveling the world with like backpacks.
I'm just like, here's my very inconvenient luggage, but it looks cute.
But there's a time and a place for both, right?
Like, fair enough.
We're like, okay, this is convenient. We can just shove our luggage up. We don't have to ever check it. We don't have to wait for our bags, right? Even if you want to carry, you can use like a carry-on suitcase that you like a rolling bag, right? Like that's usually what I use is a rolling bag. But for this trip, we went with backpacks. But
We just wanted like the mobility of backpacks.
yeah.
But also every time we were on an airplane, like our backpacks were like so heavy. So like I think the maximum you can have is like 7 kilograms for like a carry-on, and we had like
in certain like European budget airlines,
and like we had like 15 probably. And so like some of the things we did to kind of like alleviate getting checked and stuff like that is you just like want to be maybe a bit closer to the front of the line, but then also like just the way you direction yourself to people. And
Okay, that makes such a difference because
Yeah.
the other day I was flying from Calgary to Saskatoon, and I normally like have you can have like a personal bag and like a carry-on, and I had my personal bag on top of my carry-on instead of on my shoulder where you almost can't see it, you know, because like the way it's angled. And she was like, "That's not gonna fit. You can't take that." And I was like, "Lady, I've been traveling for like 6 months to a year on the same flight every month, and it fits." And she was like, and I was like, "Look," like squish it, and she was like, "Okay." Like let me go through. But I noted, I was like, I always have it on my shoulder.
Yes.
And I was like, I had it out. And
Yeah.
I was like, oh,
Or
I
like
feel like I'm onto something.
we've even gone as far as like, well, our bags have like straps. Like we'll take the straps off so it doesn't look heavy.
Yes.
But like really you're like, your back is dying, you know, but you're just like,
You're like leaning over the counter. You're like, it's fine.
yeah, exactly.
And like also I feel like so many flights these days, like they charge so much extra for baggage, so most people are bringing a carry-on now, and so then it's so full on the plane, right? And so you run into the problem of like the overhead bins are so full, and so we started being
literally
like,
my biggest anxiety.
we were like, we need to get on the plane like first, like we need to be like close to the front, so we're like these hoverers now. We're like hover near the front and like
That's hilarious.
make sure that we get our bag in there.
That's hilarious because I'm shocking. I'm like, I will be on this plane last. I am not sitting on this plane any longer than I need to. And then the one day, as I was like sitting there waiting, even though they'd already called my section, because I'm not fancy, I'm not at the front of the plane. Like I'm like, that bougie energy is just like, you know, whatever. And I was like, all of a sudden they were like, we're gonna need to check bags, and I was like, they're probably gonna want to check mine.
Yep.
Luckily, I found a spot, but I panicked. I was like, I don't want. The whole point is I brought a carry-on,
Exactly.
Yeah.
so I don't lose it and it doesn't get wrecked.
Exactly.
Maybe one of my other like random items that for me I was like, I'm so glad we found this along the way. Actually, we didn't bring it with us, was a reusable straw.
Ooh.
Because I'm so sick and tired of paper straws everywhere we go.
Yeah.
So we found
They're
a
the worst.
reusable straw, and I was so happy about that. So we
Yeah.
used that like everywhere we went.
That's
So
a good little
That's my
tip.
little random tip. you
Yeah.
know?
We also bought air tags. We bought one air tag for like my backpack before we left, and so it was in there, and I was
Okay.
able to just like track it around because we did check our bags like
A couple
twice.
times.
Yeah. Like we took 16 flights, but we checked it in twice.
Okay,
so
but
pretty
I'm
good.
curious, and maybe you guys will know because obviously maybe you haven't lost your luggage yet, but I'm like being in the travel world and hearing from travel people, like, can you go to them and be like, it's right here, like this is where you find my bag, you know, when they're like, my bag is like, is an air tag from your understanding like really helping, you know, if people are losing their luggage?
I think it's just
Or peace of mind.
Well, yeah, exactly. I think it's more of a peace of mind thing. Like I've heard of like other people who've had air tags and have shown like the baggage people. It's in China right now, and I'm in Canada or whatever, and they're just like, okay, well, I guess we'll call them or whatever. So it is, I guess, helpful for information, but it's not like they can be like
Get it to you any quicker.
exactly.
Based on this air tag
Yeah.
photo.
I'm interested. Have you guys hacked anything to the point of getting something for free?
Yeah, we've got all kinds of stuff for free.
Tell us all the things. Maybe biggest thing, favorite thing.
Well, do you want to?
Well, like-
do you want to say the stats maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sure,
let's hear
okay.
it.
Maybe because then that will kind of
we'll
like
do
give a
some
grasp
stats
of like
here. We'll do
okay,
some
We love
stats.
stats.
Hit us,
Jeez.
Marley, with the
Okay.
stats.
Okay, so in 2023, we collected 804,166 points. Was how many we collected in 2023.
That's like a lot.
Yes.
I think so.
I mean, I don't know.
So that's like based off of like Marriott Bonvoy points,
Aeroplan
points, TD Expedia points. So from that, we got 9 flights. 2 of them were business class, 3 lounge visits, 20 nights at a hotel, and we went to 11 countries. So we saved over $11,000.
Take my money.
what?
So we spent.
Want to travel?
Excuse me.
We're like totally upfront. We're happy to be like, hey, this is how much we actually spent. Like we spent $965 on credit card fees.
Okay.
So
Okay.
it wasn't free.
Correct.
Right? Like
Yeah.
sometimes the myth is like, well, it's not worth it unless you got like a free credit card. And we're like, well, a free credit card's not going to get you very far.
But $11,000 saved compared to $965 you spent.
well, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. So you only spent $950 in cash.
No. Like we spent $965 on credit cards.
Okay, got it.
Fees.
And that saved us $11,000.
I understand.
But we spent
We spent
like,
more
more
than that,
money.
for sure.
Right. Like
Oh, right, 'cause
we
you're
had like,
accumulating
to get
the
the
points.
points.
well, or what we mean is like we spent
Like, on our trip, we
money
still
on our trip,
Like to eat and like to
Like there was hotels that we stayed at that like we didn't get for free, or
Correct.
flights that we didn't get for free, right? But for us, I guess even like our flights, probably one of our favorite things we've done so far is our first credit cards that we signed up for, we were focused on Aeroplan points. So we went with the TD Aeroplan and the American Express Aeroplan,
Yep.
right? And so we started collecting our points, and a lot of that was from our wedding. But you could use like a tuition payment, a house renovation. You know, like there's so
even
many
your
things
rent
we do
if
that.
you wanted to.
Yeah, you can actually pay
There
your
are apps
rent
now, yeah.
and you can get points off of that. So
Chexy sponsor us.
Thank
yeah,
you so
That's
much.
incredible,
through something
though.
called Chexy, and we used it. We used it all last year
Oh,
when
yeah,
we were
totally.
renting, and we got so many points from that. So we collected our Aeroplan points, and so we looked into booking our flights to the Philippines. And when we looked into it, it was going to cost around 50,000 points each, like one way, for us to fly to the Philippines. But then we found out about the Aeroplan stopover program, which charges you about 5,000 extra points, but you can stop anywhere that they have like a connecting point, and you can stay days. Like 40 days if you want to. Like, it's not like an overnight. You can stay a long time. So we're like, well, where should we go? And we realized that one of the most convenient spots was to go to Seoul in South Korea. So we're like, well, should we go? Neither of us have ever really had Seoul as like, oh, can't wait to go to Seoul. But we're like,
yeah, why not?
Why not? And so we paid for our ticket to Seoul and then to Manila with points. So it cost us about 98,000, I think, for the two of us.
But it was actually like adding the stopover turned out to be cheaper than buying without the stopover.
Right.
For somehow with like the point system worked.
But I feel like this is the way these systems work. It's like what you said, where you're like, it's actually better to just, or like the value to get a first class or business class ticket compared to economy. Like, yes, when you look at it, you're spending more points, but you're only spending 100 more points instead of doubling that point, right?
Totally.
Seoul has like the best airport ever.
Oh, it's so they have like showers and
when it's like rated
and, like,
one of the best in the world.
And it's so clean.
Ever dreamt of waking up with lashes that are flawless and brows on point without lifting a finger? Well, Glam Lash Studio is here to make that dream a reality. If you're all about saving time in the morning while still looking absolutely stunning, this is for you. Lash extensions, brow laminations and waxes, keratin-infused lash lifts and tints. The dream team for an effortlessly stunning look. Emphasis on effortless. So here's the deal. Their lash extensions bring the drama, giving your eyes that extra pop. I used to have lash extensions and I absolutely loved how it looked. Brow laminations, it's like magic for your brows, giving them that Insta-worthy fluffiness. I recently had one of these and highly, highly recommend. And let's not forget about their lash lifts and tints, the not-so-secret weapon for a low-key, high-key, gorgeous look. Say goodbye to the morning makeup struggle and hello to routine as easy as hitting snooze. Your future self will thank you, trust me. Book in today at Glam Lash Studio and let their team of extensively trained and qualified staff do the rest. Her listeners are getting a special code to receive a discount on their next visit. Use code HER10 when booking in with the amazing staff at Glam Lash Studio. We're all about making our mornings easier, and we're doing that with Glam Lash Studio. Don't forget to use the code HER10 to save when booking. It's time to amp up those lashes and brows because life's too short for dull eyes and you deserve to shine. Don't forget to use code HER10 when booking and connect with them at glamlashstudio.yxe.
And so then we ended up booking our whole hotel in Seoul was a Marriott. Like we stayed at a Marriott for 5 nights. And Marriott has, if you buy 4 nights, you get the 5th night free. So we used our points. It cost us like, I think around 100,000 points, but that was like $1,000 worth of hotel. Wow. So we paid nothing to stay in Korea.
We were on like the 30th floor, had a nice like floor to ceiling window, like, and they even left us like desserts because we were, we like got Marriott, status.
Yeah.
And so some of the perks.
So you're saying with all these upgrades, like you're like, this would have cost us $1,000, but we used our points.
So we paid like, so if you think about it like this, we got 1 credit card or maybe took 2 credit cards. So those 2 credit cards cost us around $250. So yes, we paid for those credit cards. They come with a bunch of perks. So, but even if you don't use any of those perks, we paid $250 and we exchanged all the points that we got from those credit cards and we stayed in Seoul for free. That hotel would have cost us over $1,000 for those 5 nights.
And just the hotel would have cost you.
Just the hotel. Yeah. So it's like we paid $250 and we got $1,000 for free. It's kind of like, well, why wouldn't you do that exchange, right? Like, I understand if you don't want to travel, then don't do it.
It's kind of like when you go buy the gift cards at Costco.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like
the value
is $100, but you've paid $80.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I know it's a different spectrum, but I'm like, that's kind of the thought process.
Yeah, it is. It's like, well, you're kind of trading in. You're like, well, okay, you do have to put something forward, right? You have to invest something. But then I think the return is so great for us because it meets a goal that we have.
And I think that's an important piece because I think sometimes, like, I know on social media, I'll see travel things and it'll be like, here's all the places I stayed for free. And of course, there's like actual influencers out there who are doing like collaborating, and I've stayed in hotels for free because I don't say it's for free because I had to work for it, but there's that exchange there. And I think what you've just said, which is like, you still have to like invest something. Like you want to get all these amazing points, and you guys aren't sitting here being like, we got the free credit card and we got 800,000 points. You're like, no, we had to put a little skin in the game, right?
And I think that's where like most like people and even friends that we talk to, that's where like they stop. They're like, oh, I have to invest something and maybe a tiny bit of risk to get this thing, but they don't want to do it. And it's kind of like, but like once you like open your first credit card and get those few points and you use that for something free, it's so great. Like,
well, and I'm like, we're all spending money.
Exactly.
Like at the end of the day,
I think,
I'm like, we can all use it towards something,
I
right?
think the rent thing is
the
really
rent.
interesting, because I'm sitting here and I'm like, okay, like Nick and I like did a massive renovation last year. We're in the process of doing one actually today. It's downstairs. So sorry if you hear anything, but I'm like, you're sitting here and I will acknowledge, like, you guys were like, we had our own wedding and we had a wedding. So for the people who are sitting there going, I want to travel, but I don't have any foreseeable big purchases in my future, is there any kind of, like, other than the rent, that you're like, hey, this is like a really easy way, or this is the credit card I'd be using? Like, I know you already mentioned the ones you like, but anything specific for that?
Well, I think for that like scenario, American Express actually does something that like other credit cards don't, where they're like, okay, well, if you spend X amount in 1 month, then you get like, okay, I can actually give specifics. If you spend $500 in 1 month, when the offer was still the same as it was when I got it, like for the American Express Cobalt card, it was spend $500 a month and you get 2,500 points. And so all you have to do is spend $500 a month, and you can do that up to 12 months.
Which, like, of course, we're spending $500 a month.
Yes.
Exactly.
Like, my one trip to Costco.
Exactly.
Done.
And so it's kind of like, but then other credit cards is like different in the way that like they want you to spend $3,000 in the next 3 months, and then you get the sign up bonus. So it's kind of like American Express, they kind of like drop it out a bit.
They spread it out.
They spread it out.
Almost
but
to keep you longer
Exactly.
with the credit card compared
totally.
to like $3,000 up front.
Yeah, or like somewhere like $3,000. Like there's even some out there like $10,000, and we're like, well, when are we ever going to do that? Like,
Yeah.
But like, yeah, it's kind of like, okay, that's why it's so important to like have a plan of first, like, okay, what do I want to use my points for? And then next being like, okay, well, actually budgeting, how much do I spend in a month, and how much of that spending can I use on credit cards?
I think that's the key piece.
Yeah.
You know, because you guys said at the beginning, like, know your finances. So I think if people go in and look at their finances, you know, which I'm a huge advocate for, is knowing where your money is going, and then being like, okay, what portion of this can come off of credit cards? And a lot of it nowadays can.
Yeah, exactly. And the goal is to make it sustainable. Like, it's not just a one-time thing that like, great, we'll do it this year and we'll never do it again. Like, we want to make travel hacking sustainable and like a good and a healthy way of even like opening credit cards and like knowing our budgets and knowing how much you spent. And I think like that's the goal. So like the goal is not to just like take one trip and then we're in debt for the rest of our lives.
No.
Like the goal is to kind of like, we can actually take these trips and maybe they'll be spread out a bit more, but like they'll be actually worth it because they'll be like free or cheaper. So.
And I think like I think what often happens is people will be like, oh, well, I want to take a trip like next month, but I don't have any points, so I'm not going to do it. And we're always like, but if you opened the card now, a year from now, when you're saying that again, because probably you're going to want to go to Mexico.
Yeah.
You know, like no one's going like, yeah, I don't want to go to Hawaii.
No,
Yeah.
You know,
well, and that's what I was trying to say earlier. Is I'm like, everyone is gonna need to go somewhere, probably at some point.
And so if you start now, where you just go, hey, I'm gonna like start slowly and accumulate these points, knowing that someday they'll become useful for me. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. It's better to start early rather than be in a rush, because a lot of them are actually, you know, if you spend every month this amount for a year, okay, well, then it's going to take you a year to get all those points, right? So it does take time for some of them.
Yep.
Some are fast and you need a big purchase, and some are slow over time. And so the sooner you start, the more, like a year from now, you could be, you know, you and your husband going to like Mexico or an all-inclusive or something like that, and maybe half of it is paid for. To us, that's a win, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Well, and what I'm even thinking is, because Nick and I, right, we've done this renovation and we obviously like, this is nothing I would have ever had on my radar, but I'm like, oh, like, could you have relooked and gone, we know we're having a big purchase. Let's relook at our credit cards.
Yes,
and
that's
be like,
what we do.
Exactly.
Now this is actually
Well, even like upgrading the studio.
right?
Yeah. I know. I
don't know anything about credit cards.
I mean, Nick is already getting points, but we're not travel hacking. You know,
and we get points, and like this is something like we usually convert, right? Because we don't go places. But I think the other important piece is like if you're someone like me, and I'm like, okay, Nick and I go to like Canmore for a few nights,
but hotel
once
stay.
a year, but hotel stays, right? I think the travel hack, we're calling it travel hacking when really it's like point hacking. I feel because we can now convert points and we can buy things with points. Like there are like I know our credit card has like things you can buy with your points, right? So there is obviously benefits to doing this, even if you're like, I'm not planning a trip, right?
And maybe I think like what comes to mind for me too is that a question we often get asked is, so what do you do? Like now you have these 10 credit cards. Are you just going to like keep those credit cards forever? And we found there's actually like a lot of options of what to do after that year. You don't want to close the card before a year. If you close the card after like 6 months, that's going to dip your credit score. You don't want to do that. But if you wait after the year or around the year mark, like it's possible to even ask for like a retention offer often. So like, say to the bank, like, I'm going to close this card. Is there anything you can give me because so-and-so card is better or whatever? And they might be able to say, okay, actually, if you spend $1,000, we'll give you this many points. And you can decide, is that worth it for me or not, right? And the other thing is some of the cards we actually just see as having enough value, so we're going to keep them. Like the Marriott Bonvoy cards, every year you automatically get 1 night free stay. And that's up to 35,000 points that you can spend, which you could easily get like a $300 hotel room or probably more than that. You know, like you go to a hotel in like Vancouver or Calgary, like
they're expensive.
So expensive.
Yeah, they're very expensive.
I mean, hotels here in Saskatoon aren't that bad. Even like the points value, like you could easily get quite a few nights at a Saskatoon hotel. But for us, we're like, well, we're going to keep those cards because we're probably going to need a hotel in the next year. And we'd rather stay at a nice Marriott and use our points and have paid the $100.
Yeah, exactly.
Than be like scrambling to be like, what hotel are we going to stay at?
Yeah.
So we keep those cards because you don't want to close cards that you've had for a long time either. That's part of your credit history. So you don't want to like just all of a sudden close all of your cards. It's better to like downgrade and just literally put them in a drawer
like
and
let
don't
it
use
sit.
them.
Okay. Well, and I like what you were touching on earlier too, of basically being like, you know, to use your credit cards responsibly, you know, and to have smart finances, right? And I think that I feel blessed in the sense that I've never, you know, had credit card debt, right? And so I think it's important though, because a lot of people, if we look at the stats, and maybe you have them, I don't have them, but it's like in, you know, North America, a lot of people are carrying credit card debt. And so we're not sitting here saying, you know, let's rack up more debt, right? Like you guys are saying sustainably, responsibly, like how do we use these cards to like better your life, right?
Oh, exactly. And I think like I think maybe that's where the fear comes in, is like actually not even with like the collecting points, it's with the credit cards. Because like I feel like America has like deemed that credit cards are like bad. But like, of course, in my personal opinion, but like there are credit card people and there are non-credit card people. I'm like, I treat my credit card like a debit card. I never really spend money that I don't have on it.
And it's a tool.
Exactly. It's a tool, but it's also like, well, if you don't know that you use a hammer to pound a nail in, then maybe you shouldn't be using a hammer, right?
I'm interested. You said like one of the most common questions you have. Are there any other questions that you're getting on the regular that people are asking you?
Well, basically people are always like, how can I get my points fast?
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Like, how do we get points so fast? And I think maybe sometimes they underestimate how much time and energy we actually do put into this. Like for us, this is like a hobby, right? For everyone, like it's not going to be a hobby for everyone. It might just be something you're like, okay, what's the best credit card? How can I kind of plug away? And then, you know, you check back later. Oh, look, I got all these points. Like we talk about this like every other day, right? We're like, okay, look at our points. Oh, did you check this thing? Oh, did you see these flights? Did you read that email from the Daily Drop? Like it's something we love. So for us, it's like our hobby.
And we even have like friends that are like, oh, we have this many points. What should we do with them? And we're like, okay, well, where do you want to go? What do you want to use them for? Like all these questions. And we're like, well, honestly, we can make a plan for you. And like,
that's what I was saying before with the consultant.
Yeah, totally. I'm like,
see,
we'd love to do that. Yeah.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah, we
that's
actually do. Like we do. We love
yeah.
doing it. We're like, oh, what kind of like, what's the best deal we can find?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
So I'm interested. Where's your favorite place you've been?
For me, it's probably Turkey.
Oh, I've heard Turkey's awesome.
Yeah, I've been to Turkey, I think 6 times now.
What?
Yeah, I lived there for 6 months back in like 2015 or 2016. And ever since then, I just like fell in love with it. And it feels like a place that there's just like never ending things to explore. There's so much history, so much culture. The food's really good. I love Istanbul specifically. I love, like, just feels like one of those cities where there's like so many streets, just things to explore all the time. You can go back over and over again and you're like, look, a new area. Like we went this trip.
Yeah.
And I was like, I want to go over to this spot because I've never been over there. Right. And so it was super fun to get to bring him to Istanbul and explore it together. And yeah, I'm like,
Very cool.
Okay, when do we get to go back next?
Yeah.
Amazing.
I think for me, maybe Dubai.
Oh yeah.
It's just like a different world, you know?
Yeah.
Like we were only there for 2 nights. And they're actually like, we had a hotel stay at the Element, Almina. And like they upgraded us to like this massive suite for some reason because there was no one in the hotel, I guess.
They'll do that too. Keep going, but then I want to talk about that.
Yeah, for sure. But Dubai is just like a different beast. Like there's just like everything's bigger, everything's like so bougie, and it's just such an interesting culture, you know, even like lots of like foreigners there, and just like, okay, like why are these people here? Like what are they doing? And
Like if you're curious, it sounds like you two are curious travelers.
totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's very
Explorers.
cool.
I love
Yeah.
people watching.
I think just like
Where did they
even wanting to see like just different parts of the world, you know, and I think for us, why even maybe our travel hacking has worked well is we're not afraid to like go to like the random city in
Yeah.
Spain or wherever we go, or like Romania or wherever we went. We're like, oh well, we heard about this like Brasov place. Like we've never heard of anyone who's went there, but should we go? Yeah, let's go. You know, and so
Yeah.
it was cheaper.
Yeah.
It was more accessible. I don't know. We're kind of like, let's let like the deal even determine where we're going to travel.
Because I was going to ask, do you think that it would be harder to travel hack if you only wanted to go to like all the classic places?
maybe not harder.
Well, that's where like kind of like your goals come into play, right? Of being like, okay, well, actually, like where do you want to be? Like, are you flexible? The more flexible you are, the further your points will get you. But if you're accumulating points to go to this one thing, well, that's like perfect, because then you're like
Right.
using it for your goal.
Yeah.
People I think will ask like, well, how do you travel like so much? Well, we actually let the deal determine where we're going to go.
Yeah.
We're like, oh, we could go to Seoul for basically free. Should we go? Sure.
Yeah.
It wasn't the plan, right? So, but
love
we got to
that.
see another place.
Oh my gosh, that sounds like so much anxiety, but I like it.
I'm like, I would like to watch from afar.
I don't like traveling. Here's the thing. I think the idea of traveling, like I would love to go see more of the world, but I married a farmer, so I married the land. I'm like, I really like going
the truth.
places when other people have. So like when I went to Seoul, my sister and brother-in-law had like taught in Korea and like had done a lot of time in Seoul. They lived in Busan, I believe. And so I liked going there with them because they took me everywhere.
Yeah.
And I was like, great. But the idea of like flying to like Paris, I'm like
Like
but
the
I
unknown.
won't know where to go except the Eiffel Tower. Yeah, other than that, I'm a little stressed. So I actually love that you guys are like explorers, and that's what drives you is like, this is a new place and I've never been. Let's go explore it together.
Yep.
I'm interested in upgrades.
Yeah.
Because I think this is the other thing. Someone once told me, I was talking to someone about booking a trip to an all-inclusive in Mexico. And she was like, do not buy the nicest room when you're booking. When you get there, ask them, are there any upgrades available?
Yeah.
And so I'm interested if this is something that you guys do, or if it's just like you said, they like upgraded us for no reason. Like, is it randomly happening, or do you guys have a system?
Well, like we have, like with Marriott Bonvoy hotels, we have like gold status now. And so technically they'll upgrade us if there's a vacancy. But like, other than that, I have like messaged ahead of time and be like, hey, could you upgrade us? And sometimes they'll say no. Like the one in Seoul, I asked and they said no. But then they like left me a letter and like some like snacks and be like, sorry, we couldn't upgrade you, but like here's for whatever.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, for me, it's always like,
He's like, upgrade.
exactly. It's like, well, yeah, it's already an upgrade right there, right? Like,
Plus, our room was beautiful anyway.
Yeah, it was such a
it's not
nice
like we
room.
were complaining.
no, exactly. But it's like, yeah, it's like always better to ask.
But I think I don't think by asking for an upgrade, anyone's complaining. I think the point is we're travel hacking.
Yeah. Oh,
so
totally.
Sure, yeah.
Travel hacking is asking for an upgrade and seeing if they have one.
Yeah.
Well, and what's the worst? Someone is going to say no, you know? And so I think people just don't ask probably often enough.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Whether it's in advance or at the time.
Oh, totally.
And that's when you get good things sometimes.
Yep.
Like snacks.
Well, yeah, but it can be like scary too, right? Because like you're like, okay, well, maybe if you don't travel as much or whatever, you want to like be like everyone else, you know, and you don't want to really ruffle some feathers, and maybe by asking the hotel you think you're doing that, but like it's just normal too. Like you can
I
just
think
ask
it's very
them.
normal to ask for those things.
Yeah.
So if someone, as we wrap up here, if someone was wanting to start this, what are like the three, like, let's get a good soundbite here. What are the three things that you'd be like, you need to do this to become an efficient travel hacker?
You need to know what your goals are. You need to budget, and you need to start. I say those are like the three things, and that you need to know what your goals are. Well, do you want to use this for hotel? Do you want to use your points for airlines? Do you want to use your points for go to a specific place? And then you need to budget and be like, okay, well, what credit cards do I need to get, and can I afford to get at this moment? And then you just need to get a card and just get one first and see how that goes. And then from there, you learn more. And there's like no best teacher than actually just doing it.
And step number 4 is to follow you guys and get your free downloadable resource for all the inside information.
Yeah, I would say like actually like we do have like a 25-page guide that's free. And so if I know that when we talk about it, it's like we're over here, right? Like there's just so many pieces. Like we could go on and on about like dynamic points versus fixed points. And it's like, what are you even talking about? All of that is laid out in the guide, like step by step. And we actually walk people through like, okay, how do I even figure out what my credit score is? How do I know like whether or not I can afford to get a credit card? How do I know like all those pieces, and just helping people walk through like just getting like your first card. Just get your first card. Don't worry about like getting 10 cards. Just get one card and start there.
And pay it off.
Yes.
And pay it off every month in full.
Yes. And I've gotten the free download. It's so good. Like you guys have put in obviously so much time and effort into it. Like it answers a lot of questions. So you guys need to download it. We'll link it in the show notes.
Yeah. We have this like classic question where we ask about like your favorite piece of advice, but I feel like you've given us a lot of advice. So I want to like tailor the question. I asked where your favorite spot was that you've traveled. I want to know for both of you your next bucket list location.
I don't know.
She's like, I've already been everywhere.
She's like, I'm going to Istanbul.
I'm just on repeat now. Marley's like, we're just rinsing and repeating the globe because I've been there.
No, honestly, I'm like, maybe for me, I'm like, I don't know if it's like bucket. I'm like, I just want to sit at a beach, to be honest. I'm like, I don't really care what beach it is. I'm like, maybe Hawaii. I've never been to Hawaii. I would love to go to Hawaii.
Hawaii's so
like,
good.
I just want to go to the beach. Like we did a lot of traipsing around all these different places. It's busy. It's like, it's tiring. It's fun. It's a new thing all the time. I'm like, I just want to sit at a beach.
What about for you?
For me, I think I like, this was last year was my first year going to Europe. I've never been to Europe before. Traveled a bunch in Asia, but I'm like, I'd like to do Africa and South America.
Yeah.
So I'm like, South America, maybe like Panama. I like really like want to go to Panama, and Africa, maybe South Africa.
Yeah.
Around there. So
amazing.
That's very
well. Let everyone know where they can find you. You guys are on Instagram. What's your website? Anything else you want to talk about?
Yeah, I think like the best place to find us and the most up-to-date stuff, even information on like new credit card offers and like things for Canadians. It's the Fast from Sask on Instagram. That's our website too, like www.fastfromsask or the Fasts from Sask.
Yep. And if you want to connect with us or like have have questions about points, or want us to plan your next vacation, hit us up.
Absolutely. What a pleasure, you guys. This has been a really fun conversation. Thank you so much for coming on.
It's been awesome.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us on this episode of the Her Podcast. If you want to follow along with us, you can find us on Instagram and TikTok at its.her.podcast. We can't wait to see you there.